New York University, Florence. And I am really happy to be here with you all this evening for what is the third and final event of Black History Month Florence in connection with New York University, Florence. So we will be sharing the recordings from the other two talks in case anybody missed them and you find yourselves really intrigued by what we're talking about today and want to connect back to other conversations, you can do that. This is the last event at NYU Florence, but not the last event on our program. We have still quite a ways to go just in these last days of the month. I invite you to sort of consult blackhistorymonthflorence.com to look at the range of events that are there, and especially in relation to things like exhibitions. They are up for months to come, so plenty of opportunities to go through and see them. We've been collaborating with New York University Florence since the very inception of Black History Month Florence in 2016. And so I'm really excited to have this sort of continued dialogue and this continued opportunity to share with you a range of protagonists, a range of reflections that I think are really crucial to thinking about the context of Italy, Blackness in the context of Italy. And also in this particular talk, I'm particularly happy to sort of think about the ways in which art and activism can overlap, in which our sort of imagining and tellings of stories become a way to also claim some layer of ownership over our narratives, and the importance of also connecting to a broader trajectory of time than what tends to be typically associated with Blackness in this geocultural context. And so I'm really, really excited to be here and share this with you tonight. So tonight we're here with Daphne Di Cinto, who I had the really great pleasure of meeting what now seems like maybe it was a couple of years ago, but I'm actually sort of lost on it. I think it actually was through a mutual friend. We had the opportunity to sort of sit down, meet each other and talk about the work that was actually forthcoming, which is the film Il Moro, which will be the subject of our conversation tonight. And so it's really exciting to have watched the project grow, take form, go through all the different layers of development, and to have been a part in some small way of, connecting Daphne to a range of people in Florence that I thought could be of help. And it's really a great pleasure to bring her back here to talk about that project and, to maybe get everyone intrigued so that we can kind of find ourselves at a screening at some point soon, right? And so without going too much further, I would like to see, maybe Daphne, you could talk a little bit about your own sort of background in film and what brought you to this project specifically.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you for having me. Yes, so Il Moro started very randomly as I was doing research on another project I wanted to write. An article popped up on Google that was titled 10 People You Didn't Know Were Black. And among these 10 people was Alessandro de Medici. So that was the beginning of a 2-year obsession that has brought me here today and has brought me to complete my directorial debut with the short film Il Moro. And hopefully hopefully this is going to be just a start leading to a bigger project and a bigger voice nationally and internationally, because this is a story that is supposed to be known by everyone. And it's mind-blowing how it isn't. It's not common knowledge, and not even in Florence. Anyway, kind of going back a little bit to answer your question, my background in arts, I start out as an actor, and writing and directing kind of came later in the picture. So I guess I've started I've started writing as a job about 4 or 5 years ago now. And directing has always been right there waiting to happen, but I had never really found the right project and the right moment. So it's been such a beautiful conjunction of events that has then made that happen. And I am super glad that my directorial debut is with this project, which is something that goes beyond art and is at some level personal, but it's much bigger than that. It was at the beginning of 2020 when I started writing Il Moro. And when June 2020 happened, well, I guess for everybody in the Black community around the world, there was just this, and probably not just the Black community, but obviously there was something that we felt so strongly. And for me personally, being in the midst of that and participating to some of the protests has really uncovered a Pandora vase. And I realized for myself how long I had gone my whole life without speaking up about a constant and systemic thing that was happening, because I had normalized it. I had decided growing up that that was how people would treat me and that I couldn't really do anything about it. So the awareness and the knowledge that that was not the case has then brought me and pushed me towards realizing this project that is not just a piece of art, but wants to be something that influences culture and society, and the single people that watch it, whether they come from a migratory background or not. And I hold very dear to me the opportunity to bring Il Moro in schools, because when I first started writing it, one of my goals was to allow children, like the next generation, to grow up with a figure in their history that looked like them. Aware of the fact that, you know, I completed my school years in Italy, and I didn't know that someone like Alessandro de Medici existed. I mean, I discovered it well in my 30s. So I don't think that any kid should get to their 30s to discover that there are characters in their history that represent them.
Yeah, thanks so much for sort of walking also through just the sort of impetus of the project, what sort of led to it, and the impact of June 2020 is certainly sort of a reoccurring theme in the context of you know, the way the world thinks about Blackness and the impact of Black history. But I think that in a certain sense in Italy, that year strangely marked an awareness that I think was impactful in other ways. I think in a certain sense, I say that because in a certain sense, in the context of the United States, the awareness has been pretty present for a very long time, and the capacity to come together and engage against and push back against systemic racism is a constant push. In the context of Italy, that's also been true in that there is a constant push, but somehow I think that the rallying around that moment, especially amongst the sort of younger generations, was so crucial in, you know, first off, looking out and seeing each other, and then really thinking about what it means for us to sort of be in charge of shaping the narrative, holding certain situations and institutions accountable, and also seeing the ways in which, you know, these more explicit forms of oppression in the context of the United States, of violence, manifest themselves in sort of the daily existence in so many more subtle ways in this context that really need to be wrestled with. And I think that, it's really interesting that then that you're pushed in that moment to really think about the fact that the project you had been developing, like, yes, like this is right, this is the project. And it's interesting to think about the sort of the context of debut in relation to it. But I wonder if, for people that may not know Alessandro de Medici's story, that are listening in, if you want to just say a few words about, the basic story of Alessandro, and perhaps what fragment of that story you decided to focus on in the film, just in why those choices might have come about.
Yeah. So Alessandro de Medici was nominated the first Duke of Florence in 1530. He was the son of Pope Clement VII and of a Black slave that served the House Medici. Now, the story is so engaging. The fact that this young boy was taken from his mother and legitimized into the Medici family because at that time they found themselves without heirs to bring on the family name. Really interesting fact is that Pope Clement VII was illegitimate himself. And the fact that he became Pope was something, because you wouldn't really have access to those roles as an illegitimate person at that time. Historians still debate whether the father of Alessandro de Medici was Pope Clement VII or Lorenzo de Medici, Duca di Urbino, who was the, let me just get straight, the genealogy. So I believe grandson of the Magnificent. Anyway, what happens is Lorenzo de Medici, Duca di Urbino, dies, and he is the only heir of the main line of the Medici family. So now we have the Pope, who's the Pope, so he can't really be the ruler of Florence, and nobody else, because the legitimate heirs are women. Caterina de Medici, who at the time is literally a newborn, and Clarice de Medici, who actually has married a Strozzi. So, that is that. And anyway, they're women. So what happens is that there are two illegitimate kids that are legitimized into the family, Ippolito de Medici and Alessandro de Medici, who are basically the same age. I guess the difference being that Alessandro's mom was a slave and that he was of African descent. What happens is that, let's go back a little bit. At the time, they had to make sure they had options, because having only one heir would be risky. This person could die, because we know that at the time it was much easier than today to die young. And a family like the Medici family wanted to have influence on more than one sector. So normally a family like that would have their own people in places like the Vatican. So what happens is that, to begin with, these two children are channeled into two different routes. So Ippolito is thought of as the next leader of Florence, while it is said that Alessandro would probably have a career in either the church or as a general. And then history happens. There's the sack of Rome, the Medici get exiled from Florence, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but what happens then is that Pope Clement VII makes peace with Charles V, and the Spanish emperor gives Florence back to the Medici, and Pope Clement VII then nominates Alessandro the Duke, because in the meanwhile, Ippolito had been made cardinal. So this is a little bit of the story. I mean, to me, it's a film. How is this not a movie?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, those complicated overlaps and layerings. I mean, even just looking at Medici genealogy is like a nightmare, it really is. But how did you, so in terms of the moment that you decided to focus on in terms of the development of your piece, what is it about the sort of the dynamics of that or the story of that that really brought you to focus on this particular series of episodes or this particular period of time?
Well, so as a filmmaker, what I'm interested in is emotions. And it's what's between the lines of history and what's in the history books. So, you know, we can all read the events and we can all look at the paintings. I like to ask myself, how did they feel? What did they think? What were their struggles? So that's how I approached this project. The fact that Alessandro's story drew a parallel so strong to what happens today just led me to write a story that is, you know, focuses on Alessandro's emotions inside these events, and not just of Alessandro's, but obviously of the other characters as well that are involved. And to then give this parallelism to the world and to the people that can see themselves represented in it.
Yeah, so I think one thing we could do is maybe take a quick look at the trailer just to sort of introduce a little bit of the visual language, the sonic language of the piece to the audience.
Alem.
Una volta ristabiliti, ho già in mente per te una carriera da... Più gente con i tuoi capelli.
Se Dio continuerà a mostrarci i suoi favori, Firenze diventerà un ducato.
Duca Ippolito de Medici.
No, Duca Alessandro de Medici.
E lo sapete qual è la mia prima memoria? Una donna che mi somiglia e mi corre incontro. Piange sempre disperata e continua a gridare: Alem, Alem.
Alem.
Digli di darmi Firenze.
Offese che non mando giù, so riconoscermi di più. Questa battaglia finirà, noi ci rivedremo là.
Firenze mi scorre nelle vene, caro cugino. Anche se tu provassi a togliermi tutte le gocce di sangue che ho nel corpo, io sarò sempre Firenze. E Firenze sarà sempre in me.
Questa voce era tabù, ora le ali vola su.
So drama, right? I really love the way that also, you know, as we sort of look through, you were talking about the emotion being sort of what really draws you to the piece. And I think it's one of the things that in engaging in reflections on history, a lot of times emotion are what allows us also to come more in contact with a more fully round figure rather than the ways in which history tends to record figures. And I think that that's true also in, you know, it takes looking, we're very fortunate to have so many images of Alessandro de Medici, so many different portraits, because it's through seeing all those different portraits that you start to kind of get a sense and a picture of some of that more interior side. But I think, and here, I know that you made a whole bunch of really specific and strategic choices. And I'm wondering, how you developed, because you kind of pulled all of this together, right? I'm curious because I think a lot of people also who may not be familiar with the realm of filmmaking, most of the work is really behind the scenes. It's preparation, it is the sort of research, it is the sort of development of a certain vision. It is also bringing together a whole team of people and to sort of make this thing happen. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the impact of the sort of behind the scenes, because I think you also were involved in all of these behind the scenes in a period of time that was particularly challenging for the entire world, right, with the pandemic. And so what that moment and the sort of different pressures and social realities of that moment might have done to the behind the scenes, to the research, to the sort of outreach.
Yeah. It's been a blessing and a curse, the period of time. So first of all, I guess one of the blessings has been having time to do the research and to write. One thing, I guess, to mention, but we can talk about this later because this is not answering your question, is going deeper in the research. Because what is easily found is not the full scope of what is out there. What I then did was be stubborn about it and disturb and bug people, asking them to be involved and to help make this happen. And actually, you were one of the people I bugged, and you were super kind to put me in contact with various people in Florence that also gave a hand in making this happen. It's been such a communal effort. And what's really exciting is that the people that I contacted in order to make this movie, who ended up being involved, really saw its potential and the importance of this story, and what I wanted to say with it. And that's why so many people at such a high level decided to lend their talents and their skills to make it happen. The pandemic made it difficult because it was difficult to come together. So I didn't have the rehearsal time that I wished I could have. But on the other hand, the pandemic got us 2 medieval castles for free. And they were like empty and we could just shoot in there, which was incredible and mind-blowing at the same time. It was a bit of a challenge to get them, at least to get one of them. The 2 castles are in Dozza and in Imola, which are in Provincia di Bologna. And one is Rocca di Dozza and the other one is Rocca di Imola. And with Imola, it's been such a cool story because they didn't want to give me the castle because I was requesting a part of it to shoot the exteriors that apparently a little piece of wood had fallen at a certain point during history. So, they said it might have been dangerous, but it really wasn't dangerous. And I insisted, and I finally got permission to shoot there, which has given such a different quality to the film, having those locations in. And the exteriors, you see a little bit of it in the trailer, but you'll be able to eventually see it when we're going to be able to screen the movie, are incredibly beautiful. And we definitely froze because this was January 2021 when we shot the film. And we froze, and we froze alone because we were the only people there because everybody else was, I guess, home in lockdown. yeah, so it's been a curse and a blessing, and I think probably a blessing more than a curse.
Right. Yeah, when I think, it also, the idea of the communal effort, I think as we sort of imagine and think about the overlap between some of the involvement that we have, some of our work as activists, because I know you also in sort of activist circles, and what it means to sort of, in a certain sense, come together, first of all, share a certain vision, think about different ways in which we can all contribute to that vision. And I think that there's a lot of really intriguing layers that happen in artistic production, artistic research, especially something like film, which is so collaborative in its nature. But I think, when you were talking about like the pandemic and the impact of it also, I'm just thinking also about the way in which the emotionality that you're talking about, that inspires you, that drives you, how the pandemic also really rendered so many of us so open to a certain emotionality that might have been hidden by just the daily tasks, right? That we get so locked into. And so it's interesting to think about how that might have been something that teased out, a different emotional charge, which was produced by the social environment of that moment, right? But then I also, wonder, like, so when you're reaching out and you're sharing your story and you're trying to get people involved and trying to get them excited about it, what are the tools? Like, is it a storytelling tool that you're using to sort of inspire people to get involved? Because I think it's also an interesting thing to think about in relation to ideas of leadership, right? And so what it means to really get people excited, on board, to set a certain tone, to sort of establish a certain relationship based on a vision, based on something that isn't concrete until it's done.
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying that the relation with activism, I'm involved in various activist circles, and I just realized that every single person has a different skill. And in these circles, I really admire people who are so committed on the political side, as in really bringing their voice in the political spaces, the physical political spaces. And I realize how that is not where my skill lies, and that my skill lies in storytelling and in visual storytelling, and that what I do can be an asset to what these other people do, and that our coming together can really bring forth a stronger voice than we would have as single people alone. Sorry, go back to the question because I got lost in this thought.
Yeah. No, just in terms of if you want to talk a little bit about like so you were talking about now as storytelling as one of your strengths, but how do you sort of transform a form of storytelling into the motivating? How do you activate a group of people to get involved through that story? How do you, create that emotional charge? And I think that's something also in the explicit form of directing, right? That's also there. And so, there's the behind the scenes, and then there's also the physical thing, so if you could talk a little bit about that.
The crazy thing about it is that before doing it, I didn't think I would have been able to do it. And then I found myself in the midst, and I thought, well, this is on me, because this is, first of all, my project. And if I don't ride, nobody's going to ride with me. And that's how I presented it to the people. And I went in with a passion. I'm incredibly passionate about this project and this story. And I think that is what people responded to. Because when I began, I had nothing. I didn't have the actors. I didn't have the locations. I had a mood board that, I and some colleagues had drafted. And so I went there with this virtual piece of paper going, hey, this is the idea on paper, and I think it's gonna be beautiful, but we really need help. And, you know, there were no's, but there were yeses as well. So I would say that passion is the strongest element there that really allowed me to move the project forward. And as in behind the scenes and on set, I wanted to make sure that I didn't want just the story to be talking about us. I wanted the people on set talking about themselves, meaning that I was really adamant to have a set where representation would be apparent, where you could turn around and see the society that I want to see. And it was just really exciting to see these, well, obviously it was a very small crew because it was a small budget project, but all these key people came from all kind of backgrounds. And just being there as the director of this project and turning around and seeing my ADs and my makeup artists and, you know, my production designer and even the people that weren't on set, you know, my social media people, my producers, it was so satisfying because in telling a story that I hope represents us, I am also allowing a small change into the actual reality and into the now, into the present. And this is just a very small step that I could take with my means because it's, you know, one person. But in doing so, I'm just hoping to open a door for everything that comes after, not just in my world and in my projects, but in the projects of other people that hopefully will get inspired by the fact that this is possible. And even when it comes to big production companies that are established, there is no excuse in saying, oh, you know, this is Italy, we didn't find anybody diverse. That is not true, number one. Number two, you didn't look well enough. So in doing this in a small scale, I hope that it has some resonance in a bigger scale.
No, I think that's great in terms of thinking about you know, what it means to sort of shed light or shine light on Black talent. You know, sometimes I think in collaborative projects in general, bringing all these people together is really about sort of signaling a certain presence. And so simultaneously, you're sort of creating forms of solidarity with each other through the development of the project. Of course, you're making a sort of memory because that's what projects do. But then, you know, you hope that it's also something that when people are looking to the work and as the work sort of gets out into the world, that they're also looking at all of the behind the scenes and thinking about all those things that you don't necessarily see on screen, but you know is there, right? And I think that that's really, really powerful. And I think, you know, here you're talking also about, you know, you're making a film that is a historical film. And so, you know, there's this other dimension to it, right? There's many different kinds of filmmaking, but then there's this filmmaking where you're looking at history and thinking about what it means to sort of negotiate your role in telling that history. Things that, you know, debating with what it means to sort of think about what we consider accuracy, right? What we consider, you know, reality. All of these things are sort of layers that are involved in the process. And, you know, artistically, you know, navigating that is not always that simple, because I think that a lot of people have an understanding of film, especially historical film, that everything's going to be 100% accurate based on X, Y, Z, which basically means that as a filmmaker, you're limited to that very little amount of information that is actually really there. And also, in the context, I think specifically of Black history, all of those fragments that have been simply discarded, not considered, not recorded, right? How do you fill in those places and fill them in a way that actually really cares for what those realities might have looked like, right? These are these wonderful challenges. But I think, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, so to dive into a historic film, I think for me, for the work of Black History Month Florence, we like to think about the language of like Sankofa, which comes out of what's now Ghana, and this idea of looking to the past to understand something about the future. I think I get the sense that this project for you, in terms of thinking about the history, is really not just about narrating the past, but it's also really about paying attention to the future and determining some of the things that are possible there. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what it means to sort of go to history and go into Renaissance history in Florence, of all places, which is really like the hallowed grove of a certain historical narration, in order to sort of speak to today's time, today's realities, and how do you navigate that relationship between reality, accuracy, and all these things that are sort of requested or required of a film, that can also be limitations to a certain artistic vision.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to that, it's about making choices, deciding, maybe to take an event and be accurate in the event, but then use your imagination for what is around it, because nobody is going to be able to tell us what that character felt at that moment. I'm not even in biographies when people say, oh, this is what I felt. You don't know if that's actually what they felt, because people write what they want us to know. But yes, this film for me is mostly for the future, and reflecting on the past, it is just the beginning. The way I see it is, it all starts from education, and if as a second generation Italian or person with a migratory background, I go to school and I get treated a certain way because both the teachers and my schoolmates are not aware of the stereotypes that they are applying to me, and that non-awareness comes from the fact that those characters in history that legitimize us and our existence are not analyzed and not talked about, and very often whitewashed and just painted out. Well, then that's where we need to start. So with a film, which is a language that today we're also used to, because, this is the era of image and we all are so used to respond to visual stuff. I would like to bring this into schools, just in a way where it can just then build up and poke at people's curiosity, in order for them to go, well, what is this? I didn't know. I want to know more. I'm a filmmaker. I'm not a historian. I'm not going to give you all the facts. And, in my films, there is going to be quite a chunk that is imagination, because that's what filmmakers do. My job is to spark the conversation and to spark the curiosity and to spark the knowledge that these people existed. It is then up to the spectator to say, okay, let me get to know something more about everything that is around this story. And when I say know something more, I would like to push people to really do their research beyond Wikipedia, please. Because, you know, obviously, there's a Wikipedia battle going on Alessandro de Medici's page, which is mind-blowing, because come on. But if you click on the discussion page, I believe in the Italian Wikipedia. So apparently people have been trying to write in information about the background of Alessandro, so the African background of Alessandro. And whenever that happens, somebody reverts it back to the original page that says something along the lines of, there is this rumor, but some historian in the 70s actually said that it's not true, without a footnote reporting why or how or what were the sources of this historian. What's actually really funny is that the Wikipedia article says something, but then if you go and you know, at the bottom of it and analyze the sources are saying something else. And I find it just so interesting that it is allowed to actually say something that is not true as a truth, still reporting the sources that actually analyze the truth. Just a thought.
Yeah, well, those are the complicated layers of the wiki world, right? You know, you got to always go down to that bottom and look at those sources and really sort of think about what they represent. I think, you know, I wanted to, so first, if anyone has any questions or comments, you can feel free to leave them in the Q&A box and we can attend to them. And we thank you for that. But I wanted to ask you one question, just because it's something I'm like unsettled by and, you know, constantly thinking about and trying to find a narration of that I'm not sure that I've quite arrived at. And I think it's something that connects to some of the work that you're doing here. And that is, I think that a lot of times, you know, with the work that was done in the context of the Galleria degli Uffizi on being present on this virtual exhibition, there was a lot of conversation about representation in dialogue with it, the representation of Black Africans and in the Renaissance works. And the more I heard that word, the more I sort of found myself saying, well, maybe it's just like the title. It's just about presence. It's not actually representation. And so I started to think a lot about what distinctions are there between presence and representation. So we have sort of these clear indicators of a presence in the city, but then when the depictions of the figures are created mainly by white individuals, what does that say? What does it mean? Is it possible for representation? And then it had me asking myself also if representation needs to necessarily come from, you know, Black voices, for example, like if that is what representation looks like. And I'm not quite settled on either way, but I wonder, I think with your work, right, you're sort of pulling out both of these ends, right? You're sort of really pulling at this idea of presence that is both explicit and implicit. And then you're also sort of thinking about representation, because I think that in the development of the film itself, you're thinking about representation, right? And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like if this relationship sort of maybe stirs something up, because I think it's something that's an ongoing question in my world.
Yeah. Well, I think that they're definitely not the same thing, presence and representation, because, okay, I'm going to talk in filmmaking terms. Presence means that you're there, but you're an extra. So you're in the background and there's something going on in the foreground, and the people in the foreground are white, because that's how it's been going for most of the time. Representation means that in my film, the center of events and the person I'm pointing the camera towards is not what up until now has been considered the norm and standard. So what's important is where you point your camera, and where you bring your mic, because obviously, you know, you've got a boom next to the camera and you got to point it in the right direction. And up until now, it's only been pointed in one direction, but we're finally kind of starting to gain awareness of the fact that all these people that have been in the background, actually, that sometimes have been in the background, because a lot of times they haven't even been in the background, also have stories to tell. That is a film too. And I 100% believe, and I'm a strong supporter of the fact that we need Black people telling Black stories. And this is not a dogma. So in my opinion, we need to move towards Black people telling Black stories and white people also telling Black stories, but with the awareness and the right research and doing justice to them, just as Black people will tell white stories in the same way.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, and I mean, I think that, you know, in those dynamics of storytelling, so one question that popped up is about when and where will it be screened. I wonder if you want to say a couple words about that, but also I know that it's also been received, you know, it's in the context of awards and things like that, and maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those responses that have emerged. Which have been really, really positive. So if you want to talk a little bit about responses more broadly, and then sort of where it's going, so where we will be able to sort of think about coming together and seeing the work and when that might be, you know.
Well, first of all, I cannot wait to be out there with all of you at a real cinema, or, you know, some sort of room where we can all be together and watch it together, because I've made this film for people to watch and for people to get together and watch and experience together. At the moment, the film is in the festival circuit. It just started the festival circuit. In fact, we premiered at the Toronto Black Film Festival just this week, in Canada, obviously, Toronto. There are going to be other festivals coming up that I can't share with you yet, because this is how it works. But if you keep following us on social media, it's at Il Moro Film, both on Instagram and Facebook. We post the information as it becomes available. So the minute the film is going to be off the festival circuit, depending, when it's going to be at a point where enough festivals will have screened it and it can then be screened in Italy without any problems, then we're going to basically open up to public screenings. I am super excited about bringing it anywhere I can in the Italian peninsula, because it's its home. And I really want to make sure it gets, to most cities and most towns. So there are, it's in talks. So there are quite a few places that already have asked to screen it, and we will get there in due time. I'm hoping in, a few months, but I can't really give you a number or a date yet.
Yeah, I totally get that. But I really appreciate you. We're all super anxious and excited to see it and to share as well. I think that filmmaking in general on a project like this is such a sort of long timeline. And, that sort of moment of arrival, right? We can think of it as when the film is finished, but we can also think of it when it's screened. And then, there's so many different moments of it. But I wonder, just in closing, maybe if there's a way you want to say something about sort of the tenacity, I think, that's necessary to really, not just initiate a project of this sort, but to also really stick with it, understanding that the timeline is slow and long and dependent on so many factors, so that the thing that we pay so much attention to of when we're going to the cinema to see it is really just sort of a last phase of this incredibly long process. And so what it means to really stick to that, I know that the process of fundraising, all of these different layers, right, are so complicated in really walking towards this film. So if you could say something about that, and maybe I think also in relation to people that might be working on projects that they're sort of pitching and looking at the timeline, and maybe especially as young practitioners, being sort of alarmed at that longer trajectory, what it means to really commit to something.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's long, and that's the way it is, and you're just going to have to make peace with it. I remember thinking sometimes back in the day when, you watch the Oscars and people say, oh, this has been 10 years in the making. And you're thinking, how is this movie, an hour and a half, has been 10 years in the making? And that's because it is such a long process, taking it from the first word that you write on your computer to the cinema. But what it is that you have to get married to your project. You kind of have to live and breathe it and wake up with it and go to bed with it, and just take it with you wherever, when you go back to see your parents and when you go out with your friends. And sometimes you have to tell it to shut up and sit in a corner because you also need a break. That's the other very important thing, breaks. Because especially if you're passionate about something, it's so easy to just dive in and never stop. But then that never really helps the creative process. And it's really good to go away and come back with new energy. And no matter what, there are always going to be hurdles there. And there's always going to be people still questioning what you do. And what I say is, listen to them and then turn around and keep doing what you're doing. At the moment, I am trying to work hard to bring this project to the next level, because at the moment it's a short film. I would like it to be more than a short film. So I'm going to share this with everybody tonight. But I recently had a meeting with a producer, an Italian producer. And, I have been a little bit resistant in contacting Italian producers for this very reason that I'm going to say. This person asks me this question in these exact terms. So, do you want to go on with this narration of Alessandro de Medici being Black? Because, historians debate. So I may have blurted out that he should have done more research than just Wikipedia, but the fact that after doing a short film that is small but took so much work, that is geared towards giving a voice and a face to this character that has been cast in a corner and whitewashed so much, after all of this, and after having the visual of this short film, a producer is still going to ask you whether you want to whitewash your character. And he's not talking to a white person. I think that's apparent. It's mind-blowing to me. So that said, there's gonna be hurdles, no matter what you do and no matter how well you do. So it's all about going on till the finish line without letting anybody get in the way.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that thought. And I mean, I maybe he thought that like in the full version you wanted to make him white, just to sort of change the entire project and vision. But I think that what you speak to in terms of really going forward with things and really understanding that even when we arrive at sort of a key moment, right? Like the point that you're at right now with this film, that there's still further to go. I think so much of what really sustains the work and the vision is all the people that have been involved along the way, and the sort of support system that gets generated there, the energy of those individuals, the work, the creative vision, all of those things are really incredible sustainers of a project, and they really push you through. So that's the sort of wonderful thing about these sort of long-term relationships that you forge with a team and all of these different people that are involved. So yeah, I really wanted to congratulate you on the work that you've done, and we're really, really excited to see the film. And we thank you for taking the time to share with us and to speak with us tonight. And I will invite all of you also, for those of you that are in Florence, tomorrow night, we're actually opening up a new project in our space, which is the recovery plan. It has not really been announced very widely because we're just a mess in this period, but I will invite you there around the research of an artist named Muna Musie. And we hope to see you there soon, and we really hope to have the opportunity in the future to invite Daphne to come down and join us in real space, maybe with the whole team, to sort of sit there and talk about what's next. So thanks again, everyone. Have a really wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me.